If I asked you how you watch movies and TV, what would you say? On your TV, your computer, your smartphone, DVD, cable, internet? In the United States, you are probably going to say you watch movies and TV shows through streaming services on the internet through your mobile devices. All of you watching this video are technically on a streaming service. Today, a lot of people can ask you, what streaming service do you have? And a lot of people will reply with something like Netflix or Hulu. Streaming online is starting to become the status quo, with so many new streaming services popping up, unfortunately leaving TV and cable channels behind. However, it's pretty easy to see why people are transitioning into an emphasis of streaming services. It's cheaper, more convenient, there's awesome and plentiful content, you can watch it wherever, no censorship, and most popularly, there's no advertisements. It's just business. People want what's more convenient and cheaper, and cable has just not been able to keep up with the sharp rise of streaming. This phenomenon is not new though. This transition from cable to streaming really is just a revolution of new technology that has been present for generations. It's a competition of innovation, like how VHS took over Betamax, DVDs took over VHS, and cable and satellite TVs took over broadcast TVs. But is that really happening between cable and streaming? How powerful will streaming become? And will cable really become obsolete? Let's find out. Cable has had quite the significant business for many years, as it raised corporate giants like Comcast. If you ever had a cable service for TV like Xfinity, you would know that you would get access to hundreds of channels, but at quite the high price. Though you can get certain cable packages and services at affordable prices, the average cost of cable packages per household in 2020 was over $200. That can be close to or even more than people's utility bills. For some people, these prices might be worth it. The hundreds of HD channels you get access to can be very useful if you like a broad range of programs like sports, news, and classic movies. But what about people that really only need a few channels? Some people just might want to watch CBS and ESPN only, but would have to pay for the package that contains a ton of channels you don't even care about. This is merely one of the problems. Another problem I especially have trouble with is censorship. Since the cable is receiving information from airwaves, the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, has the power to regulate what people see and hear. I believe there is some stuff that shouldn't be viewed or heard by everyone, but it can get annoying like censoring swear words. Some families, however, support that, which may draw them to stay with cable. These identification of problems within a technology always happens like I said before, but let's talk about another service that streaming also took out. When I was younger, I remember on Fridays or Saturdays, it was the best feeling when my parents would take me to the best store ever to rent movies and video games. That grand place, of course, was called Blockbuster. I really loved Blockbuster because there were so many movies to pick out and snacks you could get. Those were the days. But one problem I didn't have to deal with as a kid was when you had to return those movies. And when you returned them late, you would get a ridiculous late fee. Your subtotal of $10 of a few movies could turn into a $40 or $50 total if you had turned in a movie or game late. And that late fee would increase the longer you didn't turn it in. And this was the case for millions of consumers of Blockbuster. You just had to deal with it. Then there came a guy named Reed Hastings, who was sick of the ridiculous late fees and decided to start a company named Netflix. Who remembers the rental era of Netflix? At this point, Netflix was like Blockbuster but online. On Netflix, you didn't have to worry about turning in your DVDs at a certain time or a late fee, and the selection of movies was quite extensive. Netflix was doing quite well in its early stages, and was even set up to be acquired by Blockbuster for only $50 million. Unfortunately, the Blockbuster CEO declined to buy it. Little did he know, he had made a multi-billion-dollar mistake that would eventually kill Blockbuster. Netflix would continue to thrive with their DVD business until they noticed a new company called YouTube, which showed very promising results of online streaming. So in 2007, Netflix announced an on-demand feature where consumers could watch movies and TV shows instantly. This would essentially be the system that is used today. Netflix had flexed its muscles and warned vulnerable formats like DVDs to adapt or become obsolete. Today, we are really starting to see companies adapt, compete, and die out. But it really is inevitable that something is going to die out, just like all of the other formats before. Netflix wasn't even the first warning that cable TV would die out one day. I think one of the earliest competitors to cable was the rise of premium networks. These premium networks were essentially separate channels you had to pay for so you could watch them on cable. One of the first premium networks to take off was called Home Box Office, or HBO. HBO rose exponentially as it contained some of the most popular shows of all time, like The Sopranos, The Wire, Oz, and Sex and the City. These premium networks were big competition to basic cable, as these shows had no constraints or censorship, freeing them to do whatever they wanted. Other networks would soon follow suit, like Showtime, Cinemax, and Starz. But why would cable bother during the 90s and 2000s when it was just doing fine? This is possibly the thinking that would catch them off guard. These premium networks would soon transition into online streaming, where anyone can subscribe to gain access to tons of popular shows and movies. Unfortunately, cable still settled. In these past few years, Netflix has become a complete giant, as the company generated $24 billion in revenue, as they continuously put out quality TV shows and movies that are extremely popular to all audiences. But when there's business, there's competition and adaptation. Netflix has competition like Hulu, but no company has been able to surpass Netflix's 200 million subscribers. Yet. Companies have realized streaming is the future and are beginning to compete with Netflix with cheaper, original, and popular content. The largest streaming services we saw last year were surely Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Amazon Prime Video, and the launch of Disney+. All of these services are creating original shows or uploading movies and TV shows that they own without people having to rent or buy each of them. They all just pay a monthly subscription. One reason why Disney Plus became so popular was that they released all of their old TV shows, which kids and teenagers grew up with back in the day. Disney also is a complete giant, as they own Pixar, Marvel, and the rights to Star Wars, meaning people can watch all of these movies just for $7 a month. Think about how this compares to cable. Say you want to watch Revenge of the Sith on cable TV. You could only watch this at one point in time. There would be a ton of ads, pop-ups, and maybe even cut content. On Disney Plus, you can watch it whenever, wherever, with no ads or cuts. The same is for premium network streaming like HBO Max and Showtime Now. It's just so convenient for consumers, and it's just really difficult for cable to keep up with that demand. There's another problem that arises, not for cable, but for networks. Networks like NBC, ABC, and CBS are also dying as viewership for their content is declining. Network TV just can't produce the quality and intriguing content premium or streaming services can. I don't think NBC could ever produce a show like Game of Thrones due to its censorship and finances. So what can these networks and cable channels do? Like I said, you can adapt or become obsolete. What we're seeing now is channels starting streaming services. NBC has just released its service called Peacock, where viewers can watch any new or old show at any time. CBS is going to release Paramount Plus, with plenty of old and new original content the corporation owns. This is how you compete in today's market. You have to adapt to the trends. It's just so plentiful and convenient for consumers. However, I see one problem with all these new streaming services: the cost. The cost of just one streaming service is relatively low, like how Disney Plus is only $7 a month. But what if you completely cut cable and only rely on streaming services? Let's count this up. Say you like all channels and subscribe to as many services as possible, like Netflix, Hulu, Prime, Disney Plus, HBO Max, Showtime, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Discovery Plus, ESPN Plus, AMC Plus, and Apple TV Plus. There are variables that can lower costs like bundles or having ads, but all these can add up to over $100. This is quite expensive, but it still just might be lower than cable. That's a problem for cable. Why would people pay $200 for hundreds of channels and ads they don't even want, when they can watch all the shows they do want to watch at any time with no ads for less than that? The COVID-19 pandemic has made it even worse for cable, as these channels struggle to keep up content when these streaming services are constantly pumping out new and original content. Unfortunately for cable, this may be a fight they really can't win. Unless they can find a new way to adapt by resorting to streaming or making streaming more available, these times really will be the endgame for cable. For the next few years, I'm sure cable will remain a reliable source of television for the general population, but sometime this decade, cable is likely to phase out. New streaming companies and channels are adapting and competing for online dominance, with features consumers can't ignore, like little censorship, no advertisements, low costs, and unlimited content. Cable TV has had its warnings, with premium networks becoming popular and how Netflix was able to make Blockbuster obsolete. It appears to be cable's turn to be the old ways of life, as new streaming services pop up every day in order for those channels and companies to survive this new technological decade. Cable had a good run, but just like formats before, new technology will always find a way to be better than the old. Out with the old and in with the new. There are now new questions for this decade. Will Netflix remain dominant, or will a new streaming service surpass the giant, or will a new technology make streaming obsolete? With all of these new streaming services competing, the streaming wars have officially begun.